This video is brought to you by Fab Fandom. Oh hey, I didn't notice you there. I've been hearing a lot of buzz about this Dune movie, and I don't really watch that nerd shit, but the book looked cool, so I decided to dive right in and see what the buzz is about, And this book is kind of political and a little boring, and I kind of like it. So before I start my review, I figured it'd make sense to talk about Dune Part 1 since I didn't review it. Dune is adapted from the influential sci-fi novel of the same name and tells the story of Paul Atreides and the dividing political conflict of the universe, taking place on the planet of Arrakis. Now, it's no shocker that this movie is great. Denis Villeneuve proves himself yet again as one of the greatest directors of his generation by bringing the world of Dune to the big screen. Accompanied by Hans Zimmer's amazing score and cinematography by Greg Fraser, this movie is a cinematic feast for the eyes and ears. Solid 9 out of 10. Now, the issue at the time of its release was that we were not guaranteed a sequel, and a minor complaint of Part 1 is that it's only 2/3 of the story, and it would have been really lame if we couldn't see the other half. But thankfully, the overlords over at Warner Brothers heard our cries, and now we have Part 2. We did it. The Dune agenda prevails. So with all that out the way, how does Dune Part 2 hold up to its predecessor? So as I stated before, this movie acts as the last third of the book adaptation, which is an interesting route to go because the last third of the book is not very heavy on the action and the conflict is literally told to us. So I was interested in how they were going to portray it in this movie. And after having seen it, I can say that this movie definitely went in a more action spectacle route and changed quite a bit from the book. This movie is way more action heavy than the first one and the book, and if you're someone who's not a fan of the typical dry characters and slow moving plot that's associated with Dune, this one might be more for you. And this isn't exactly a criticism because Denis went pretty hard with this one, and I love how it serves as a final spectacle for the overall story, and it gives a sense of finality to the narrative. I love that this movie focuses on Paul integrating into Fremen culture and its overall themes of religion and prophecy, which is contrasted very well with the Harkonnens, who are a lot more menacing this time around. A minor critique I have with Part 1 is that Baron Vladimir isn't as threatening as his book counterpart. He's just kind of nasty, but here him and the other Harkonnens are at their most intimidating, which is carried greatly by Austin Butler as Feyd-Rautha, who is just as cold and sinister as he is in the book, but it's accompanied by Austin Butler absolutely chewing up the scenery. In fact, any scene on Getty Prime was my favorite part of the film. I love the use of black and white in the scenes, and it accentuates their already ghoulish appearance. It manages to make them even more terrifying, and it feels like a splash of cold water once we cut back to Arrakis. And speaking of Arrakis, the characters on this spice planet are just as good, if not better. Timothée Chalamet gives a very commanding performance as Paul, and actually presents him as a really cool character. Any scene that has him giving a speech or a commanding monologue made my brain happy. And I like that this movie gives more character to Chani outside of being Paul's side piece. I'm glad they gave her more screen time than the first one, which would have been pretty disappointing if they didn't, considering she doesn't do much in the last third of the book and is delegated to just being Paul's girlfriend. Although I will say that even though Javier Bardem is doing a great job in this movie, I think his character isn't exactly as strong as I'd like him to be. Stilgar oddly feels like comic relief, which I can understand wanting to add levity to a dry story, especially for people who haven't read the book, but I still think it was an odd choice. When he's interacting with Paul and assimilating him into Fremen culture, it's great, but when there's scenes of him coming off as comic relief, it's a little distracting. Now, there is a bit of an asterisk about this movie because on one hand, I can understand wanting to make this movie more palatable for people who have never read the books, and I'm perfectly fine with changes from the narrative if it services the story. which is definitely the case here. But the thing is, I love Dune for its political machinations and character interactions, and I feel like this movie prioritizes audio-visual spectacle over slow building tension and atmosphere, which makes it even more disappointing that Thufir and the dinner scene from the book are not in this movie. I know I'm biased because I have preconceived knowledge from the book, and I know it's asking a lot for normal people to watch a slow, boring scene involving politics, but that's what I like about this series, and I think part 1 is a better representation of this. But even though I have a very biased opinion, I can't deny that this movie rocks. Even though it has some things that weren't accurate representations of the book, I still think the book and the movie serve as good complements to each other. I definitely think the movies are great gateways into the books and serve as a love letter to the source material. So yeah, it's no surprise this movie goes hard, and I can't wait to see what they cook up for Dune Messiah. So I'm gonna give Dune Part 2 a 9 out of 10. Hey guys, thank you for watching the YouTube video. If you made it this far, unfortunately you have to hear me talk a little more. I want to take this time to talk to you about Fab Fandom, which has been a loyal sponsor for a while now, even though I don't get any money. But we'll get there eventually. As you've heard me say a million times, Meg's Etsy page is curated with handmade jewelry, shirts, stickers, etc. All very nice quality and nice prices as well. And if you use promo code Koshi10, you get 10% off your next purchase, which is a great deal on top of already great prices and items. Definitely check out Meg's page, and I want to personally say thank you for sponsoring me, even though I'm not a big YouTuber just yet. That's all I have to say. So yeah, bye. Don't drink and drive.